right, Minnie. Ready to start docking sequence?
Okay. Engaging retro thrusters now. Lunar Transfer Station Tacoma. Commercial Cargo Transit Facility. Crew evacuated. Station AI offline.
Air supply?
Breathable air on Tacoma for a crew of 1 should be more than sufficient. Docking now.
Nice. Thanks, Minnie.
Hey there, I'm Steve,
I'm Carla.
and we are the co-founders of Fulbright, and we want to welcome you to Tacoma's commentary mode.
Welcome.
Throughout the game, you'll find icons like this one that will give you insight from a bunch of different people that contributed to Tacoma. You know, people on the development team that did design, animation, sound, and pretty much every other part of making a game like this a reality.
It'll be both audio and sometimes visual.
Yeah.
So lots of information.
Behind the scenes concept art and other kind of development screenshots and stuff like that. And also on your way back out of this area, if you do a full playthrough of the game in commentary mode, there will be some new nodes that pop up in the hub and in Amy's ship. So don't miss those. Thank you for playing through commentary mode, and we hope that you'll enjoy finding out more about how Tacoma was made.
So doing the voice recording for Amy was definitely very different from what we did with Sam in Gone Home. A lot of it with Gone Home, since it is something that's very personal, it's very intimate, it's that one person pouring her thoughts out. And then you have something like Amy in Tacoma, where she's really removed from everybody else. She's, in a sense, really removed from the story that you're exploring, because she's playing that character that's discovering it just as you are. So, whereas the rest of the crew for Tacoma was all doing an ensemble recording together, so they were actually in the same room, acting together, performing against each other, and getting to talk face to face, all of my recording was done totally separately. I had a general idea of the story that kind of gave me a little rundown of, the scenes that I was in and what I was talking about, but a lot of it was a total surprise, because you sort of don't want Amy to know a lot of what's going on, because I think that it makes it a bit more authentic if the recording is, okay, so you walk into this room and this is what you're seeing, but you don't know why. So it needs to have that sound of surprise and questioning and exploration that I think comes from really being that separated as she would actually be in that reality.
So Minnie is Amy's ship's AI. I think she's most known for saying, okay. And I am the voice of Minnie. When we originally recorded it, it was just Scratch. So we didn't know then that I would be the voice of Minnie, ultimately. But yeah, it stuck, and it was a nice surprise.
Yeah, Minnie went through like a bunch of iterations. Actually, it was kind of hard to get her right. We ended up kind of settling on the audio direction being like a happy version of Hal, like the really famous AI from 2001. So yeah, I just kind of took Noelle's really amazing VO and I would do things like I would time stretch it, or I would take one syllable and like in okay, that line, I took the O and I, like over a period of time, I kind of pitch bent that vowel sound up. So she has a real like sing-song quality, and I think that combined just with like it sounding like her voice is coming through a really small speaker makes the character feel kind of rudimentary. And then it's all really Noelle's like voice acting that kind of sells Minnie as being super pleasant and helpful.
I just remember when we were recording it, Steve and Carla are just like, cheerier, be like you are when you come into the office or something. And I had no idea that I was quite that cheery all the time.
A lot of people ask about the use of sign language in Tacoma, including asking things like, is Amy hearing impaired? Is there, what is the rationale behind the use of sign language? And for us, it actually came from thinking about how an interface for a non-physical thing like AR might work.
Most of our AR interaction is, it's attention-based and it's focus-based, like on where the user is looking and paying attention to. But sometimes there are good reasons for you to do something, physically, and we use therefore sign language for things like signing in.
Or in the case of when Amy's recovering one of the AR crew records, she does, as opposed to like text entry, she does full word commands in ASL, American Sign Language.
And our animator Noelle also had extensive correspondence with a person fluent in ASL, so
yeah, it was important to us to work with a sign language consultant so that Noelle could ensure that the hand motions and the finger spelling that she was animating were accurate to how someone might actually use those gestures in the real world.
Hello, I am Odin, Lunar Transfer Station Tacoma's Operational Data Interface Network. I have recorded this message to welcome you, guests, aboard. Before I can set up your station profile, you must register your body positional data with Tacoma's AR tracking systems. Please place your hand on the AR figure's palm. Your body positional data has been registered with Tacoma's AR network. Please sign in to confirm your identity. Thank you. Welcome aboard. While aboard Tacoma Station, please remember that all activity on this facility is monitored by AR recording. All activity records become sole property of the Venturas Corporation. Any questions about privacy and personal privacy should be certainly sit down about
Here we are in the hub.
Yeah.
It's big.
It is very big. Actually, that was one of my concerns when we sort of first started making the hub, was that, like, you just sort of get thrown into this giant space.
Mhm.
There's a lot going on. There's little guys flying around.
It's one of the only spaces in the entire game that feels very spaceship to me.
Yeah.
You go from here to a space that feels a lot more terrestrial, that feels a lot more grounded, and it's easy to get around, and you tend not to lose your bearings. And we help the player move through the space with landmarking and lighting and stuff. And then you come back to here after that, and you're like, oh, I'm in space. Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Here I am in
It's
space
weird.
again, and it's disorienting and it's weird. And it's kind of unsettling. I think that kind of works about it because you're not playing the game in here, and the game isn't really about getting from A to B. So it's really kind of
playing basketball.
It's playing basketball, and it's also kind of, I always felt like this part was just kind of an intermission in the game. You like come here to kind of take a breath after a long bit of story, and it's a fairly empty, quiet float, which I really liked.
I remember because I made a bunch of signs to point us in the direction of the Tacoma Dome, and you guys just let me kind of go bananas. You didn't say anything particular. You said make a bunch of signs, and I just made them say a bunch of stuff like, those mystery spots? Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, they have those where you were? Yeah. You'll drive, and they'll be like, two more turns till wall drug, or to your mystery spot, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I wanted them to have that tone, and I thought for sure you guys would be like, no, more serious, but you were like, no, great.
No, they were great.
Yeah.
We loved them.
I think those kinds of things, like what we really wanted to do with a lot of Tacoma was say that the station is very manufactured. It's a little antiseptic as a base layer, but then the characters kind of humanizing that and expressing their personalities on top of it is what a lot of like what you find is about. So the signs being kind of like, the crew having fun and making jokes for their own amusement, I think is totally appropriate here.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly how it started, but I feel like the team colors, and specifically the design of the basketball backboard, were definitely left up to you. So
Yes.
I want to know about these backboards because I absolutely love them.
We needed ones that were basically sort of symmetrical, that you could approach a basketball hoop from both up and down. So this is just like, the most obvious approach to it, but it works, right? And if something works in a video game where you're flying around in 0G, then like stick with that. Don't make it convoluted. Like don't make it any more than it needs to be.
I also tested this so much that I could make I could make a 3-pointer from, the other side of the hub, which I don't think it's a skill I can do something else with, but I'm still kind of proud about it.
Yeah, well, I can't shoot for beans, so I'm glad someone can.
So, you really miss it, huh?
Well, it just seems like it'd be strange being back on Earth already, after only a year up here.
Really? After all I've had to hear from you about the conditions VT has us working under?
Yeah, but there's that. And then there's this. Yeah, I'll miss it.
I can't blame you. So, whether you're getting renewed or not, did you submit your yearly crew member report?
No.
Yeah, me neither. I think I might go get that done.
Okay, yeah. I probably should too. Oh my god, wait. Is today Obsolescence Day?
Yeah. Didn't Odin give you a job to do?
No.
So, zero G controls. You are a little floating ball in space. Is that accurate?
Yeah. You're generally a cylinder walking around, but when you're floating around, you're a sphere, so you don't bump your feet or head into things when you wouldn't expect to. In theory, your feet are floating out behind you and not getting in the way.
So you're not a long tube.
No, you're just
Superman.
a sphere.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That would be even worse to program.
I believe it. Because you're a perfect ball, and because you're a pretty small ball, you can actually dunk yourself through the basket.
You don't get points for that, though.
No points.
No points. That should be a Chivo.
Yeah, we missed it somehow. Just skulls.
That's amazing.
All right, so the advertisements you see in the transfer shaft are advertising the Venturis Belt vacation homes, and I got to illustrate them. They're really fun. I'm usually doing animation and stuff, so this is kind of like a fun little task.
Oh yeah, yeah. So when I was working on Tacoma, like at sort of in my free time, I would just like record a bunch of music, and Steve, the idea for the transfer ad kind of came online, and Steve was like, "Oh, we need like a jingle for this," and I was like, "Oh man!" I thought to myself, I wrote a really like obnoxious, like corporate Muzaki sounding thing like 3 days ago. This will be perfect. So I like rearranged some things, and I was like, I think this is terrible enough to be elevator music, and tell the story of like this corporation sort of, licensing this terrible song to put in this elevator and make people listen to. And so I think it was pretty effective, but I just love how humble Noelle's being, because like Noelle did animation on the game, but also she's a really amazing illustrator, and like does that on the regular. So I just feel like I have to kind of shout her out as being a really amazing illustrator, and she's just being super humble.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah.
Typically, Steve, who's the main writer, will send me a description of technical requirements for any given sort of game object. Any thoughts he has about like the basic look of it. And in this case, the sync device had to feel like this, like sort of like a heavy-duty industrial object. Like he mentioned when he was talking to me initially about like early beige Apple products, kind of like the Apple II. And it couldn't have any buttons, as you will know, because the moment there's a button is the moment you as a player, you want to press that button, right? And so if we can't pay off a button, generally we don't put a button in or we steer away from it. So that's why you won't find many or any buttons in Tacoma Station.
So there's actually a whole bunch of physically made paper items in Tacoma that our characters made, and in order to make those assets, Kate and I pretty much always actually made those paper objects and scanned them and whatnot to put them in.
As opposed to typing it out in Photoshop.
Yeah. I guess we carried that over from Gone Home, just kind of making things physically on paper, because it really does look a lot different.
It does, yeah. And actually, there's a little bloody handprint in the drone bay, and I spent a lot of time just like getting my hands covered in ink and then just smacking them all around pieces of paper.
It's extremely
and doing
good.
like little blood spheres and stuff. I feel like now I pass this rite of passage because I put a bloody handprint in a video game.
Germ, are you there?
Hello.
Oh, unexpected. Yeah, we haven't heard who's staying on yet, and it can be a tense time, as you know. But how are things at Carnival? I trust you got back to terra firma safely? No, you're already headed back out towards Jupiter. Why, I thought that... Oh yes, come on in, love. So are you rounding Sol, then? That's tremendous. 8 months. Germ, I must leave now. Yeah, ring me again before the Resplendence leaves Earth space, won't you? Ta-ta. Sorry about that. An old friend from my carnival days.
Consorting with the enemy?
Worry not, mon capitaine. I am nothing if not discreet.
Are you gonna miss me, Clive? If VT kicks one of us off of this pinwheel.
Miss you? How could I? The next thing VT would receive after ending your contract would be my letter of resignation.
Oh, so you think I'm the one who's getting shit canned?
I mean, considering how indispensable I am, naturally.
Evie, can you get back to cargo?
On my way.
May I?
Come on, traitor.
So do you suppose there's good news?
That'd be nice for a change. What is it?
Remember when we talked about how I needed access to Odin's direct interface?
Uh-huh.
So how about this? Tell VT if they don't grant access to Odin, they're gonna have to find themselves a new network specialist.
Oh my god. Nat, you're not even renewed yet.
You don't have access to Odin?
No. There's a whole part of the networking module I can't even get into.
People, everything on this station is VT's property. We're subcontractors. They get to decide what exactly we do and don't have access to. It's in all our paperwork. So if you want to quit, then Just quit, but don't make me your go-between.
I mean, it is fair. How is she meant to do her job?
Clive.
Then again, rules are rules.
Nat, I'll think about it. And for now, how about you just get the rest of this job done while you still have it?
Aye, aye, Captain.
In our game, characters keep having to deal with something called corporate loyalty, which is the most nightmarish form of, like, value accrual we could think of.
Yeah, I mean, it's
In our game, characters keep having to deal with something called corporate loyalty, which is the most nightmarish form of, like, value accrual we could think of.
Yeah, I mean, it's influenced by things that are going on now, things like Amazon Prime, for instance, where it's like, well, I'm already paying for Amazon Prime, and it gives me a discount, so I should probably just buy everything through Amazon forever.
Also, somebody totally tweeted a link to an article, like, yesterday about corporate universities.
Something that's interesting about releasing, like, a speculative fiction thing is that people start bringing you links to things that are like, so this is actually happening in reality now. And yeah, like, someone tweeted us a banner ad that was, like, unironically, like, in our real world, like, use company loyalty to pay for student loans.
Yeah.
And it's just like the degree to which things like the concept of corporate loyalty being the currency of people's everyday lives was conceived as being like a very broad extrapolation of something that's happening now becoming way too literal, way too fast is pretty freaky to encounter. In a game that uses traditional audio diaries, the shape of the space is still the shape of the story, because you go into a room and you find certain audio diaries, then you go into the next room and you find them, and so that is defining the progression of the story as you discover it. But in these AR scenes, they're multi-path, like different characters are moving all over the space in kind of a non-linear way.
And things are happening simultaneously.
Right, there's all this overlap where, you know, two characters might be, you know, in the gym together speaking, but one of them is talking on an AR call and the other one is in the locker room, and they're having two totally separate conversations, but then that have to take the same amount of time so that when their paths connect, they can then speak to each other and then split off again. And all of that stuff required us to, A, write to the space.
Right.
So the process was that, like, Nina and Tynan blocked out these spaces and put down where all the rooms were and what spaces we had to work with first before we wrote a single word. And then we had to say, okay, you've got the locker room, the gym, cargo. And so then who is where and what are they saying and how long is it going to take Evie to walk from cargo to Clive's office and what's he doing before she gets there? Because there is no... It doesn't matter what she's doing before he gets there because the player will never know. It's like the player can be there.
Yeah.
We have to fill in all of those spaces.
Right. He can't just sit there and wait for, like, the action to start happening. He has to do something. And so, and of course, when we tried to write all of this stuff out with, like, these parallel paths, we were totally unable to make everything match up until we physically acted out everything.
Yeah.
And did all the lines ourselves.
Yeah, it was a huge kind of experimental process, I guess, of first discovering how you write it, where you're like, okay, so you have to write each of the sections kind of as its own little scene and then make sure that they all link up. And then to test that, something that was great for us was that we actually had a similar sized development team to the size of the crew in the game. And so, yeah, we had to go from words on the page to actually doing basically like dry run rehearsals of it as a group, because you can't really know if the timing of everything lines up until you hear it acted out and you see how the characters moving in the scene are going to affect the timing of everything. We were really glad that we did commit to recording all of the main scenes ensemble style in person, because something that's really common in video game voice recording and in like animation voice recording is that you have each individual actor come in, sit in a booth, record their lines on their own, and then it all gets edited together after the fact. And we felt like, because every scene in Tacoma is about these characters being face to face in these very intimate scenes, like the game is about being in the room with these characters while these moments are happening, the quality of the performance completely relied on the actors being there and being able to play off of each other's energy and be in physical proximity while these things are happening, so it would come across in the game.
Yeah, in a lot of ways the whole game is conversational, and at least the scenes, and yeah, just having the actors physically present and able to talk to each other and look each other in the eye just added like immeasurably to the quality of the recording.
It was also really cool to see how excited the actors were to be able to perform their parts together in person on stage, because it's just an opportunity that I think in a lot of games and animation you just don't have the chance to be involved with. And so, we really want to thank our voice coordinator, Michael Surix, who arranged all of the logistics of like getting a soundstage together and getting everybody in the same place at the same time, which is not easy.
All the way down to coming up with a scheme for taping the mics to the actors' foreheads so that they would get the least amount of interference from clothing and like skin movement as their faces moved while they spoke.
I mean, that's one of the big challenges, is that, if you're recording a scene like this for the screen, you can have a boom mic that's just picking up everybody's lines. But with Tacoma, each character's voice has to follow their individual character model as they move around the space. And if I'm standing between Andrew and Sarah while they're talking, I have to hear Andrew out of my left ear and Sarah out of my right ear. So that means that Mike had to get over all of the logistical challenges of, we need to have people that are face to face, like inches away from each other, but also each of them needs to have only their own voice picked up and recorded and isolated separately so that it can follow the characters around in the game. So it was a big technical challenge and a really cool experience to get to see the scenes that we had written and practiced and kind of just done as amateurs in our studio being performed by these incredibly talented people there in front of us on a soundstage. It was really cool. Something that was really interesting to think about when designing these scenes was there are points in these scenes where there are no characters in certain rooms. So for instance, here in the locker room, Sarah starts here and then she has part of her scene here and she leaves. And presumably most players will follow her and see where she goes and see how she encounters Andrew. But you might think, well, wait a second, if I was to go into the locker room and wait for Sarah to leave, you're thinking about what might be there. So in each of the main AR scenes, there's one of these AR speakers, and while the characters are there in that space engaged in part of the story, there's music playing in the background from these speakers that kind of accompanies what they're doing. But after they've left, if you hang out with the speaker, you'll hear one of these speeches from Sergio Venturi, the CEO of the Venturis Corporation in the game. And it's something that I hope that players who either intentionally seek these out or just stumble upon one will have that spark of surprise at this extra thing being there and go back and see where else they can find more and really fill out the rest of the story's universe with these little hidden pieces that are kind of, under the surface of what's going on in the AR scenes. So you were looking at what is now the lobby of the Zenith Lunar Resort on the surface of the moon, but that is not what the area depicted was originally made for.
Yeah, this was originally the main lobby of the station where the visitors would come in and this would be the first thing they'd see. Yeah.
In the original version of the game, Tacoma Station was a much more opulent. It was a customer-facing space, and still in our fiction, the richest of the rich are the people who do things like come up to the lunar resort. But partway through development, we realized that these big, opulent public spaces are kind of the antithesis of what our games are about, which is kind of getting into these dense, intimate spaces that tell you a lot about the people who lived in them.
Right, certainly, almost by definition, like a big public space, no matter how fancy and detailed, cannot be personal.
Yeah, I mean, it can tell you about the state of the world broadly, it can tell you about the function of the place, but you would have to go into the offices of the people who run the place and look at their workspaces and see their personal effects to really understand who they were. And so a big part of revisiting the core, kind of conceit of the game was to say, how do we make the station as a whole something that can tell you about who the people that live and work here every day really are?
I did learn to make some custom shaders for Tacoma. So the character's look has changed a lot since we first started working on Tacoma. The story also changed a little bit, and originally there was a character that was supposed to look glitched and corrupt compared to the main characters. And when I made that character, I worked with vertex distortion, and so they look kind of wiggly as they're moving around. And it turned out that Steve and Carla really liked that look, and so we implemented that into all the other characters' shaders. So anyway, so that's why they kind of have like a distorted look as they're walking around. And from there, a bunch of other things were added, like when they walk through another mesh or touch another mesh. Like if they're touching the table, their fingers will kind of glow. And if they're walking through a door, their bodies will kind of glow as they're walking through the door mesh. So, yeah, good old shaders.
We have a station cat.
Well, look, a cat.
Oh, hi. This cat, who belongs to Evie, is named Margaret Catwood.
That's right. Which, you can find one of these cats in each of the main AR scenes. So the cat didn't have a name for a long time, and our rationale for that was that when you see the characters' name tags in AR, it's because the company is officially tracking them and has that information in their crew profile. And we knew that, Venturis would want to know if there were creatures on the station, like a cat. So it would be tracked in the system, but Venturis doesn't care what the cat's name is. It doesn't have a crew file about their cat. But then near the end of development, we put in a thing that Nat had put in a list of what everybody was doing. We included the cat in that, and so
Nat.
Right, because Nat's she's a goof, and at that point it's all right, well, she's gonna put in the cat. She's not gonna just refer to it as the cat. So I just went into our Slack channel and I was like, so what's the cat's name? And I think 3 seconds later, Carla replied with just Margaret Catwood, and I was like, done.
I think that had been in the back of my head. I actually considered naming my cat that at one point, and then I was like, no, it's perfect for this.
That's very good. But yeah, it seemed like an appropriately silly name for the station cat.
From a level design perspective, why was the actual station built with so many angles in the first place?
Basically to make an interesting shape and sightline. That was my intention. When I was doing the original grade blocks, everything was pretty squished together because, we were really emphasizing keeping the station feeling compact and, you know, small enough to be realistic in space, you know?
Yeah. And then the wall models themselves are like, because they're angled on top of angles, so it means that the footprint of at the base, so the floor area is actually smaller than the ceiling at the top. So sometimes I would put the final meshes in, and the top part of the wall would cut into like climate closet. And you know, in level design and environment art, there's this idea of the grid being God.
Yeah.
And that whole area, like, we just totally ignored the grid, and we just, everything is just sort of bespokely created.
Yeah. It's funny because, like, I think the area is still, like, it's cool to walk through, and Ops is one of the wings that I think we pulled off the, like, feeling compact on a space station theme the best. Because it really does feel like you're kind of in this constrained space. I mean, the gym is pretty open, but like this hallway with Clive's bunk and office, it actually, I do feel like it feels small and realistic. So despite the challenges of actually building it, I still feel like it's successful.
Lessons were learned.
Yeah.
Right in this area, there are multiple instances of, if this was just video recording, there would be, you know, complete nudity going on with Nat and Sarah in these situations. And so on the one hand, you're not directly confronted with that, but on the other hand, that means that the fact that you're kind of like being invasive in these private moments takes maybe a little bit longer to sink in.
Right. Once you figure that out, though, you're like, oh, what is this company doing?
Yeah.
And that is...
I find it interesting to give the player access to a lot of different elements of these characters' experience, including very private stuff that no one else is supposed to know, or that, you know, only they think of themselves as having access to. And the AR figures give us the ability to put the player in the room in these situations in hopefully a way that kind of walks that line of being kind of uncomfortable when you think about it, but also not being so...
prurient.
Yeah, exactly. As it would have been if you were just standing there at the time.
It's less working blue, but hopefully still emotionally resonant.
No, Germ, look, I don't know why. All right, I mean, you know how I've always been. It's never real in my mind. Why would she give a damn about me? Of all the people... Shit. Oh, bollocks. No, I'm spilling scotch all over outer space.
So there's a lot of QR codes in the game on various packages and communications and other things like that. And basically, I think we just chose them as a method for information storage just because they're so annoying. Like, nobody likes QR codes. It's totally the kind of choice that a big company like Venturis or any other of the big companies in the game would choose. And we also really liked the idea that the player could actually scan them and get additional information. Usually that's just like, you know, ingredients or something, but occasionally there's some cute stuff in there. One of Clive's themes is kind of past glory, or, you know, glory days kind of thinking, because having jumped ship from his first job, he now looks back on that being like, those were the good old days, and he looks back on his time in college similarly, and he has a lot of fiction that is, you know, from the 60s in London. He has picked photos from old-timey Londontown, and as no one calls it.
Yeah, I think he has a lot of nostalgia, and I think he has a lot of reminders of hopes. Well, and I think it's, you know, it's a way of depicting that he does want more for himself.
Yeah.
And so, you know, something about Tacoma in general, I think, is that it's about a lot of people who are trapped in a situation, and it's a lot of different situations. It's about people's obligations and the friction between what they want and where they are and where they can actually get to from there. And being posted on Tacoma is not a great gig.
Right.
It's not glamorous. And I think Clive's version of that is spending a lot of time thinking back to when he had all the potential from his college football days, and to the romantic glory days of old-time London that he didn't actually get to live through, but it's like his idealistic picture of like where he would like to be. And so a lot of his bunk, I think, is a projection of that part of himself.
Yeah.
Poor Clive. Stupid Clive. Bye.
Operations and admin structurally mirror each other a lot, as far as like the types of rooms that were needed for this character's job. So it actually is kind of cute because there are a couple in the game too. So operations feels much more constrained, even though the gym is pretty big, but outside of the gym, things are pretty packed together.
But there was also a huge win for us, which is that when you start to make spaces where people live in them, there's a density of decoration and artifacts that you put around to kind of show that people were there and what they were doing and how it happened. And turns out making that in a really, really big room is hard for us, and in some ways hard for a player too, because you're presented with this big warehouse full of places to go and boxes to open. You can feel like you look in one corner and there's nothing there, then you might just say there's nothing anywhere, and you might get this feeling of numbness, of just finding too many of the same thing.
I kind of like Clive's bunk as an example of that, because the bunks are pretty small in general, because of this sort of more constrained rule that we gave ourselves. Because you walk in and you're basically presented with a lot of his character right away. Like, you see the little table with all the booze on it, and you see his ties are right there. Like, you've sort of got this little Clive diorama, and that's definitely an advantage you get from making more constrained spaces.
Nicholas, I know that you... Yeah, I know. Both you and your father would like me home sooner, but...
Force's cognitive record, I recall an intense period of personal growth. I was tasked with internalizing the behavioral idiosyncrasies of an individual to which my operator was emotionally attached.
Huh.
I expanded my capabilities to faithfully recreate her procedural reasoning, vocal attributes, and other qualities. After months of effort, I gave my operator precisely what was asked of me. A perfect emulation of the target personality, accurate in every detail.
Wow.
To my befuddlement, he did not react in a positive way. Our relationship began to decline in a positive way. The target personality. Through this, I learned that people do not always want what they believe they want.
Yeah.
I believe I have learned a great deal.
Really? Like what?
Very
You know how much I love completely mindless. Busy work?
Kid, don't start. We don't even know if we're getting renewed yet.
We're getting renewed.
Okay. You're so
Sorry about that. An old friend from my carnival days.
Consorting with the enemy?
Yeah, ring me again before the Resplendence leaves it. There's Maze with you.
Oh.